So here's a question I get all the time. What is sampling? Sampling is really the process of recording sounds into a sampler, DAW or capture device. This could be music from an existing record, someone playing live instruments like a piano or synth, or even recording more obscure sounds like scraping metal or your cat. In certain kinds of music like old school jungle and hip hop and house, it was actually extremely common to build almost the entire track from samples alone. Here the drum breaks might have been chopped out of an old funk record and looped up. The bass could be made by sampling one note of a live bass player and then pitching that up and down the keyboard. And finally, someone may have sliced up an entire jazz record and rearranged all the little pieces like a puzzle to form a completely new idea. In that example, I've really highlighted 3 of the core ways we can manipulate samples to fit with the style of music we're making, and these are in looping them, in transposing them, and in slicing them up. But before we dive any deeper into some more of these sampling techniques, I quickly want to address how we actually go about acquiring these samples in the first place. Collecting these samples is really a skill unto itself. This is true whether you're going old school and digging in record stores or you're doing it right here on YouTube. All of the same principles apply. A few of my favourite channels include Soulhawk and Andre Navajo II are great for funk and soul samples and some more obscure stuff as well. And then Armando Breaks is really great for drum breaks as well, and there's lots of good stuff in there you can chop out and then bring into your own tunes. I think the real key to collecting samples is to chop out all the little snippets that you like and then save them away neatly organised so the next time you can come back to this playlist and you'll be hearing all these little snippets in complete isolation, which is so much more inspiring than being faced with full tracks every time you want to start looking for samples. If you use a sample manager like Audio Finder, which is what I'm using here, we can even do cool things like rate our samples and then order them by our own rating system. In this way we can mix and match all of our favourite little snippets from different records together. I also spend a lot of my time organising my samples into playlists, and I do this for pretty much every project or track I'm working on. And just like a DJ would prepare playlists for going to play a set, or a chef would prepare their ingredients before cooking, I think it really helps to streamline the production process of actually making a track if you have all your samples ready to go before you set off. Sample packs are another great option, especially for those of you who don't want to have any problems with copyright when you're thinking about releasing your tracks. Sample packs, there are tons of great ones out there, and I'm a big fan of these 90s style sample CDs like the Data File and the Ecstatic Goldmine and of course the Jungle Warfare ones. And I also think Rhythm Lab deserves a special mention, where you can get pretty much every popular drum break around in high quality. Finally, I've got a great variety of sample packs I've made myself with tons of jungle pads and basses and stabs and all kinds of things, so I'll have a link in the comments and you can check that out down below. In the modern world, we now have so many incredible features to manipulate these samples, from advanced audio editing features like warping and time stretching to programs like Serato Sample, which can separate stems, auto chop and key match all automatically at the click of a button. Even with all this available to us, I still think it's incredibly important to look back at how sampling began, and specifically at the old hardware samplers like the Akais and the Emus, to really understand how it all started.
So Ice Cube on Pump It Up. Y'all wanna know how we make the music? We sample. You hear that? That, we put some of that in there, some of that, and then we do.
The thing that made these hardware samplers so popular and so revolutionary was not only their ability to play back recorded material, but also to manipulate it in a bunch of different ways. This brought forth a new wave of music producer, as suddenly artists could pack an entire studio's worth of instruments and synths into one much more affordable hardware sampler.
I think it's brilliant because not everyone can play, say, a keyboard or play a guitar or play drums or whatever. So in the days when there weren't samplers, you had to have a band and be skilled in a particular instrument to make music. Well, now you don't. Well, that's brilliant.
One of the most popular companies making these samplers was Akai, which released this S-series range of hardware samplers, which started from the pretty limited 12-bit S612 in 1984 to the much more advanced S5000 and 6000 in 1998-99. Whilst the later Akais such as the S1000 did feature a number of improvements over the previous models, a lot of the core principles of these samplers remain true across the board. I feel extremely lucky to actually have an Akai S1000 here in the studio, and this was really a dream purchase for me earlier this year, and is really thanks to you guys for supporting my channel and all my amazing Patreon supporters who have stuck with me so far. And I thought it'd be really cool in this part to do a little segment where I dive into the Akai S1000 and just show you the fundamentals of what these hardware samplers are all about. Okay, so let's turn this bad boy on. And the first thing I've got to do is record the sample in. So I can come to this edit sample, and if I go to record, I just need to turn off input monitoring on my system. And then I can come into record 2 and actually just turn this input level down, and let's just get about 7 seconds for this sample. And then I've got to arm it. Now this should hopefully mean when I trigger my sample, it will pick it up in, So what happened there is I obviously put the input level a little bit too low. If I arm it again, hopefully it should work now that I can trigger this sample. Nice. And I can just press enter to demo this. Very nice. And so we've got this sample now in the Akai. So the next thing to do is to come to a program, and let's just create a new program, and I've just got to name it. So let's get rid of all of this stuff and just come right back to the beginning, and maybe I'll just call this A, and just press enter, and then I'm going to copy the test program. So now we've got a new program, and what I've got to do is come and look actually in the key group, and then I can come to span, and what we can see here is it's going to play this whatever's in this key group. It's going to play it from the low of C0 to the high of G8, and if I come to this sample 1, I can actually select the actual sample it's playing, and at the moment it's playing a sine, but if I change this to pulse, I didn't actually rename the sample before. Our sample is just called pulse in this example. Cool, so now what I've got is I've set it up so this sample is playing up and down the keyboard in this key group, and if I go to a door like renoise and I trigger the Akai, I can trigger that sample up and down the keyboard, and this is probably the most common thing people are going to do on these samplers, is just playing things up and down the keyboard with your basses and little chops like this, which I've sampled in. That's the first really common technique. The other really common thing that you're going to be doing with your samples is to chop them all up and then put them on individual slices on this key group, and this is much better for things like drums and breaks, where you can have different chops of the break on different keys of your keyboard. And in this example, you can see here I've got 16 different chops, or actually I've got 21 different chops, and some of them you see like 21 I've spanned a little bit greater, which means I can pitch those individual elements up and down, and then other ones I've just got on individual slices here. And see 7 again, I've spread that one, so some you just want to have as individual chops and some you can spread up and down. Now if I jump into renoise, I can show you the reasoning for this, and in my keyboard here, if I go through these chops, I've got the full break here on C1 from the start of the break all the way to the end. And then here I'm going from the snare to the end. And that's going from the 2 kicks after the snare. This is going from a later snare, so I'm chopping the break from each subsequent hit to the end of the break. So I've just got these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chops here of the break, and this means by having slightly longer passages of the break in this way, you can get slightly more rolling breaks a bit easier than having all of the individual elements of the break, like the kicks and snares and the hats, all chopped up on different keys. So if I play you a little example in Renoise of me programming this break. So I showed you what the first 5 or 6 slices were, but actually the rest of them are quite interesting. So here I've got a snare which I've let myself pitch in this little range up and down the keyboard, which means you can do cool snare rolls and little snare effects, just reusing and pitching up one of the original snares from the break. And I've also got a reverse hit here, which is really good for putting just at the end of patterns to roll you back around and whip you back into the next section. So a small little reverse snippet there. I think that's probably a reverse snare. And then finally I've got some of these classic Akai stretch effects as well, where you can time stretch on these old Akais and create these really cool kind of warping stretch effects. And so that's basically what I've done here, is had the kind of core of the break, and then you have some more affected layers running up and down the keyboard. But everything, as you can see, is all laid out on up and down one stretch of the keyboard in one program. So those are probably the main 2 features of the Akai, but in order to get our samples in a usable state, to either chop them up in that way or to pitch them up and down, we usually have to edit them in some way. And so if I come to edit sample, you can see in edit 1 we have some very basic features such as trimming, looping, we can join the sample, we can cut parts off the sample, and then we actually also have if I come to edit 2, we have the ability to reverse the sample, and then we have these classic time stretch samples which you heard on that snare drum earlier. So maybe for this kind of pad sound, it'd be cool to reverse it potentially. So it always takes a second to do this kind of thing. Well, that sounded really cool. Past some of these editing options, we also have control for each of the individual sounds, which is where the real fundamentals of sampling and samplers lie. And if I come to this edit program here, and I can come to this key group, and then you can see I've got these options for filtering and for envelopes. So you can come, and I've got a low pass filter I can put on this sound. If I just toggle along and I go to this note, I can filter it like this, or I can actually apply an envelope to the filter as well. And then I have other options where I can actually have like an ADSR, so an amplitude envelope here. Something I like to do with these kind of sounds very often is just to add a little bit of release. So when I let go of the key, you have a bit more of a natural fading out of the sample. In this sample 2 option, we have some more stuff we can do. We can change the loudness of each individual sample or layer in this key group. We can pitch them up and down in this area. So the same way I'm doing it on the keyboard, I can pitch layers in here, which is useful for when you're layering and you're trying to match the keys up of samples. And then of course I can filter it from in here as well as panning it. And that really brings me to the last main thing you're going to be doing on these Akais, as well as the pitching the samples up and down like I showed you, and chopping them up and spreading them up and down the keyboard. You're going to be layering different sounds, and this is how you can bring quite bland sounds to life and really make things your own. And in this example we have this nice sampled kind of chord I've got from that record, but maybe I could layer a pad with it. So got to come back to this recording screen again. And let's create a new sound this time. And then I can come and record a new sound in. And it might be alright on 7 seconds again. So I might try and just to find a pad here. Okay, cool. So I didn't have quite enough recording time there. But I think I might be able to make it work. So I come back into this edit program, into the MIDI, the key group and the sample options again. And then I need to go and add a new layer to this actual key group. So let's add 2 in, and then I've got to put the velocity on so it's going to start reading it here. And I just want them both to trigger. You can do more complex stuff where you have different velocities triggering different layers of the sample. But in this version, I just want them to both play all the time. And then this is where this sample 2 becomes more useful, because now I need to key match these 2 different samples together so that they're going to play nicely when I trigger one note on my keyboard. So now that's sounding pretty weird, but if I keep pitching it up, that's already sounding a lot better. Maybe we could filter the pad layer a little bit more. We could try panning each of them out to slightly different sides. So I could go, say, 20 on this one and then 20 out on this one. And that's actually sounding really great, and even though they're mono samples, I've now got a nice stereo layered sound. And then finally, I think it'd be criminal to leave this little segment and not quickly show off the classic Akai Timestretch effect. And in this, I've got this jungle sample here, jungle vocal sample you all know about.
What the time you have the dread?
And in the Akai, I can come to Edit 2 and come to Time. And then I have to name my sample something else. So I can just, in this example, call it 4, name it that, and press enter. And then I'm doing a 200% time factor, so I'm doubling the length of it with this stretch effect. And if I just hit go, it's going to take a minute here. And then I can hit play.
What the time you have the dread?
And then you're hearing every jungle record from like the 90s.
What the time you have the dread?
Finally, there is resampling, which is a bit of a lost art these days, but such a fantastic tool to add to your arsenal. Resampling is the process of taking a sampled sound and then changing it in some way, shape or form, like running it through a bunch of live effects pedals and then recording it again. Now there are a bunch of reasons to do this, but one of the main reasons would be to capture some live effect that is happening in the analog realm. Once you've recorded the desired sound, you could then repurpose that gear for something else.